In the golden age of Hollywood, behind the laughter and applause, tension simmered like a ticking time bomb. What audiences never knew was that one heated argument between Stan Laurel and Oliver, Hardy captured forever on celluloid, would accidentally birth their most beloved comedic masterpiece. This is the untold story of how real fury transformed into pure comedy gold, and how a moment of genuine conflict became the foundation of their legendary partnership. The cameras were rolling, tempers were flaring, and cinema history was about to be made in the most unexpected way. The year was 1928, and the Hal Roach Studios buzzed with the electric energy of creative genius. Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy had been paired together for just over a year, but already their chemistry was undeniable. Yet beneath the surface of their perfect on-screen harmony, a storm was brewing that no one could have predicted. Stanley Jefferson, before he became Stan Laurel, had always been the perfectionist, the thinker, the one who meticulously crafted every gag with surgical precision. His mind worked like a Swiss watch, calculating timing, angles, and audience reaction with mathematical certainty. Oliver Hardy, on the other hand, was the natural performer, the instinctive comedian who could make people laugh just by raising an eyebrow. Where Stan relied on preparation, Ollie trusted his gut dot. This fundamental difference in their creative approaches had been simmering for months. Stan would spend hours sketching out gag sequences, timing them to the second, while Ollie would often improvise, throwing away the script in favor of what felt right in the moment. Their director, Leo McCarey, had been walking a tightrope, trying to balance these two wildly different creative energies. Little did the world know, the pressure was building to a breaking point. Studio executives were demanding more content, faster turnaround times, and bigger laughs. The silent film era was giving way to talkies, and everyone in Hollywood felt the ground shifting beneath their feet. For Stan and Ollie, this meant not just adapting their comedy style, but also learning to work together under increasingly intense pressure. The signs were there for those who looked closely enough. Crew members later recalled seeing Stan and Ollie having hushed, heated conversations between takes. Makeup artists noticed the tension in their shoulders, the way they avoided eye contact during costume fittings. Even their trademark warm-up routines before filming had become stilted, mechanical. But nobody, not the director, not the producers, not even their closest friends anticipated what would happen on that fateful Tuesday morning in October. The argument that would change everything was still hours away, but the stage was already set for one of comedy's most legendary. Accidents. The morning of October 15th, 1928, began like any other at the Roach Studios. The California sun filtered through the massive skylights of Stage 3, where the latest Laurel and Hardy two-reeler was being shot. But the atmosphere was different, charged with an electricity that made everyone uncomfortable. Though no one could quite put their finger on why Stan Laurel arrived at 6:30 a.m., as was his habit, carrying his leather-bound notebook filled with meticulously planned gags and scene breakdowns. He had spent the previous evening reworking a particularly complex sequence involving a piano, a staircase, and what he called the perfect comedic mathematics. Every step had been calculated, every reaction timed to the millisecond. Oliver Hardy rolled in at 8 a.m., his usual jovial self, greeting the crew with backslaps and jokes. But those who knew him well noticed something different in his demeanor. His laugh seemed forced. His smiles didn't quite reach his eyes. The truth was, Ollie had been feeling increasingly constrained by Stan's rigid approach to comedy. Where was the spontaneity? Where was the joy of discovery that came from improvisation? The first sign of trouble came during the morning rehearsal. Stan had choreographed a sequence where both characters would slip on a banana peel in a specific pattern. Ollie first, then Stan, and both together in a synchronized pratfall. But when they ran through it, Ollie threw in an unexpected flourish, a little dance step before his fall that got a genuine laugh from the crew. "That's not what we rehearsed," Stan said quietly, his English accent more pronounced when he was frustrated. But it got a laugh, Ollie replied, his southern drawl carrying a hint of defiance. We stick to the plan, Stan insisted, his jaw tightening. Director Leo McCarey sensed the brewing storm and quickly moved on to the next scene, hoping to diffuse the tension. But it was like trying to cap a volcano that was already rumbling. The creative differences that had been building for months were finally demanding to be addressed, and neither man was backing down. The crew began to notice the subtle changes. How Stan and Ollie weren't sharing their usual pre-take banter. How they took their breaks at different times. How the easy camaraderie that had made them so perfect together seemed to be evaporating before everyone's eyes. At precisely 2:47 p.m., as later documented in the studio's production logs, the moment arrived that would change comedy history forever. They were shooting what was meant to be a simple scene. Stan and Ollie attempting to move a piano up a seemingly endless flight of stairs. It was a gag that would later become legendary, but on this day, it was about to become something else entirely. The backdrop for the most explosive argument ever captured on film. The scene called for a precise sequence of events. Stan would suggest they push the piano up from behind, while Ollie pulled from the front. They would struggle, slip, and eventually watch in horror as the piano rolled back down the stairs, nearly crushing them both. Stan had timed it perfectly 37 seconds from start to finish, with specific moments for audience laughter built in like mathematical equations. But when the cameras began rolling, Ollie decided to improvise. Instead of following Stan's choreography, he began an elaborate pantomime routine, pretending to conduct an orchestra while the piano sat motionless on the stairs. The crew erupted in spontaneous laughter. It was genuinely funny. Pure Hardy at his intuitive best. Stan's face went white with fury. "Cut," he yelled, even though he wasn't the director. "What the hell are you doing?" Ollie straightened his tie, his trademark gesture when he was irritated. "I'm being funny, Stanley. You might want to try it sometime." The crew fell silent. In all their months of working together, no one had ever heard them speak to each other with such venom. Leo McCarey stepped forward, trying to mediate, but Stan waved him off. "We had a plan," Stan said, his voice shaking with controlled rage. "We rehearsed it. We timed it. And you just threw it all away for some cheap laugh." "Cheap?" Ollie's voice rose dangerously. "At least it was genuine. At least it came from the heart instead of some notebook filled with mathematical formulas for humor. What happened next would be debated for decades. Some witnesses swear Stan threw the first punch. Others insist it was Ollie who lunged forward. But what everyone agrees on is this. The cameras were still rolling, and every moment of their explosive confrontation was being captured on 35mm film. The argument that erupted on stage, that October afternoon, was unlike anything the Hollywood community had ever witnessed. But what made it truly extraordinary was that Leo McCarey made a split-second decision that would echo through comedy history. He kept the cameras rolling as Stan and Ollie faced off beside the piano on those now famous stairs. Their genuine anger transformed into something magical. Stan's methodical nature, usually so controlled, exploded into a flurry of wild gesticulations. His arms flailed as he tried to explain his vision, his face contorting into expressions of pure exasperation that were somehow hilariously endearing. Ollie, meanwhile, responded with his natural performer's instincts, but now they were fueled by real emotion. His trademark confused stare became devastating. His slow-burn reactions were no longer calculated. They were authentic responses to Stan's manic energy. When Stan grabbed Ollie's lapels to make a point, Ollie's look of dignified outrage was so perfectly timed it could have been scripted by the gods of comedy themselves. The piano became a character in their argument. As they gestured wildly, they kept bumping into it, causing it to slide incrementally down the stairs. Neither man noticed, too caught up in their dispute to pay attention to the gradual migration of their prop. The crew watched in amazement as what should have been a disaster slowly transformed into the most organic piece of physical comedy they had ever witnessed. "You want spontaneous?" Stan yelled, throwing his bowler hat on the ground. "Fine. Let's see how spontaneous you are when this thing rolls over you." He gave the piano a mighty shove. Ollie's eyes went wide not with performed surprise, but with genuine alarm as the massive instrument began its inevitable journey down the stairs. His scramble to get out of the way was pure instinct, but it looked like the most perfectly choreographed pratfall in cinema history. What followed was 2 minutes and 17 seconds of pure magic. Stan, realizing what he had done, rushed to help Ollie avoid the runaway piano. Their genuine concern for each other's safety, mixed with the absurdity of the situation, created a sequence that was both hilarious and touching. They pushed, pulled, dodged, and tumbled together in a dance of desperation that somehow looked like it had been rehearsed for months. When the piano finally came to rest at the bottom of the stairs, miraculously intact, both men stood there panting.